But until then, we have Sriharsha and Mohit here from Collate that are going to be talking about embedding an MPC server into open metadata and empowering AI-driven automation. So if you two are ready, please take it away.
Thanks, Nicholas, and thanks, Nick. Let me hit the slideshow.
Yes, we can see. Thank you.
Cool. And just a shout out to Nicholas. It's great to see how the open metadata kind of enriching your platform. It's one thing to build, and it's great to see others how they are using the product itself. So that's awesome. And today, since we are talking on the MCP, so I've been told this is the highest registered RSVP meetup ever. I feel like we spoke the right keywords into the ether to get you attracted onto our meetup today. So without further ado, let's get onto that. So I know some of you. Oh, all right, there is some latency. All right, so I know some of you joining for the first time, so I want to kind of set the right context. Why we exist, why open metadata need to be exist. So we know the data complexity growing, data infrastructure is turning into hundreds of different services, and everyone is an analyst today in an organization, right? So we all want to create a new pipeline, new tables, new models, new data dashboards, and making sense of that data is really, really complex. So what we do from open metadata standpoint is to build 90 plus connectors into various different platforms to get the physical metadata out of your different infrastructures into one single platform. Not only we get the physical infrastructure, but the relationships between those, how the data is getting transformed, what is the column level lineage. All of that is embedded into one single unified metadata graph that we built today. When we are building this, we are not only, for some reason, when we are building this from a day one standpoint, open metadata came as this open source, open standards API and schema first. The reason to do that is not only get the physical metadata, but also get the semantic information on top of it. So when we're building this unified knowledge graph, it's just not just saying that, hey, this table is read by this particular pipeline and it's getting created this dashboard, but it's also telling what data is actually flowing through this graph. Is it PI data? Does it have email? Does it have SSN? What semantic information that we are calculating out of this? What is account ID means? All of that information is coming through this unified knowledge graph. Moreover, we are also profiling the tables and the data that you're using. If some schema says customer ID is unique, is it actually unique? Does it have unique constraints? Like what part of the data is missing? All of these encoded into this living and breathing unified knowledge graph. So once you have a unified knowledge graph, you will be able to build for some reason, my keyboard is not working, it looks like, so I'm going to go into this mode. So once you have a unified knowledge graph, you will be able to build a unified experience. Why that is necessary, right? You have different personas that are interacting with data. As I said, everyone is interacting with data in an organization. You have data analysts, data governance, business users, business analysts. Traditionally, they end up working in their siloed tool, siloed world, but they tend to interact with offline or through the Slack or whatnot. But they are operating on the same data. They need to have the same context. For example, data governance person comes in and says, I'm going to put a PI policy that says every 90 days we should be deleting any PI identifiable data. That's our company policy. Once they set the policies, who is going to implement that automation to make sure that policy is in place in the data infrastructure, right? So they have to kind of interact with data engineers, data scientists, data analysts to make sure that policy is held through. With open metadata, with this unified knowledge graph, and we built the unified experience, they all can come into this particular single platform and say that, hey, here's a policy, let's make sure this automation is taking place. Not only they can set the policy, but they can see the changes that is happening across your data infrastructure through the automation that we are building. So that's what the unified knowledge graph, not only that, from a perspective from the users, they're also coming and asking questions. As Nicholas shown earlier, they are updating the documentation. They're asking questions about the data. They're asking for permissions. They're figuring out how the data is laid out. All of this also is getting into context of the unified knowledge graph. So not only the data that flows from the bottom up from the data infrastructure standpoint, but also from the users coming through, different personas coming through and operating on this data, they're enriching this unified knowledge graph. Now, with this power of this, we are able to enable all of these different personas. With the same knowledge graph, we will be able to give all of this context to the AI and LLM models to enrich, to build automations, to take actions on behalf of you. This is the agentic AI that is enabled through this unified knowledge graph. So how do we kind of enable this to the LLMs of today? On the left side, you have LLMs, these amazing models that are getting built and kind of improving on a day-to-day basis. On the right side, you have this rich unified knowledge graph that actually gives the context to these LLMs on what to do, what is the data, what kind of data that you have, what is the context of the data, what are the users are doing today with the data that we have. So there is a gap. How do we interact these LLMs with this open metadata, right? To that is the answer is the MCP, the Model Context Protocol. So MCP is a server that exposes tools where LLMs can integrate and talk to the MCP and get this context, just enough context when a user comes to the LLM and asks the question, hey, what is the customer ARR today? It can make this call to the MCP server and get exposed to this unified knowledge graph. Again, this vastness of your data infrastructure, neatly organized with the context of the data as well as the users, get exposed and tells the LLM, hey, here is the data that you should be using. Here is the metadata that you should be using to take action. Once it gets that context, it can take action and do the automations or whatever the user intend to do through the power of LLMs. So that's great, but what are the challenges with MCP? If you looked at any other MCP, the problem with the MCPs are today, the architecture is, if you have a data engineering team, let's say you have 10 data engineers, they have their own day-to-day jobs, and they want to interact with open metadata APIs or whatnot through the LLMs. Everyone has to start an MCP server locally on their laptop and talk to the APIs that we expose, right? So that's not a really a scalable option for one. Now, not only that, a scalable option is technically challenging for maybe a business users, maybe a business analyst who are kind of more into Power BI, more into generating reports. We want every persona in the organization to be able to kind of take advantage of open metadata. By exposing this level of technical details to the end users is not a scalable, not a practical solution. Secondly, from an open metadata standpoint, again, if you're a user of open metadata, you already know we tend to keep our footprint really small. We want to make this as simple of a solution to deploy, use on a day-to-day basis. Open metadata comes with just 4 components for you to kind of productionize today. We don't want, again, ship yet another MCP server separately that every user has to kind of install and know and add more complex to the solution. Secondly, again, the authentication RBAC has been a challenge in MCP. This is widely talked about in everywhere, in anyone who is implementing MCP server. But if you, again, from an open metadata standpoint, all of our APIs are authenticated and controlled by our very rich role-based and attribute-based access control. So how can we embed and take advantage of that into the open metadata, into the LLMs that you're using? And more importantly, when you are actually using this rich knowledge graph, a user who has certain parts of exposed knowledge graph and doesn't need all the context should be prevented from accessing the entire context, even though if they are interacting with LLMs. Like I shouldn't, if I don't have a customer's table access, I shouldn't be saying that, hey, who is the highest paid customer today, right? That shouldn't be addressed and answered by the open metadata APIs, even if they're exposing through the MCP server. So these are the main challenges that we are looking at and kind of working through that problems to solve. So what did we do, right? So again, open metadata, one of the things that we do is to expose applications as framework. Applications are a way to kind of embed your own little tools and make enrich open metadata server. This could be, if you're already kind of playing around with open metadata, you are familiar with it. So I can go to settings and applications. You see a variety of different applications already provided for you. There are a few things like available in data insights reports, search indexing, telemetry, and reverse metadata. These kind of things already exposed into open source. And there are other applications that we build as well that enables and enriches the feature set that we have on top of OpenMetadata. This is a pluggable application framework. So that's a great way to kind of take advantage of application framework to provide an MCP server. So what we did is to use that application server, build an MCP server as an application. So the advantage of that is to, when you start the OpenMetadata server, you will have an MCP server that you can enable. Once you enable, it automatically exposes the MCP server APIs along with the OpenMetadata APIs. So what that means for you as a user, now just like I'm connecting to my REST APIs in OpenMetadata server, I can use my LLM clients like Claude Desktop, Goose, or ChatGPT, connect to my MCP server that is running as part of OpenMetadata server. So you as a operator of OpenMetadata server, you just install OpenMetadata, enable MCP server. Anyone in your organization can take advantage of MCP server that is embedded. So I don't have to run my own local MCP server, connect to OpenMetadata server. I can make my directly connect to OpenMetadata server endpoint and get exposed to MCP APIs. Now that's one problem. The second thing is we talked about user authentications and everything else. Again, from that standpoint, we expose user authentication to SSOs, and we provide ingestion bot through JWT tokens and everything. And as a user, I also have an ability to kind of use APIs through my personal access token. So I can go to my profile and go to the access token and generate a token and have a token expiration days configurable and generate this token. So this token will have embedded my identity. So when I'm using this token, I'm doing on behalf of my user, which is my identity in this case, Harsha. And when I'm doing this, I also get my permissions associated with it. My roles, my inherited roles, all the policies that are restricted for me will be taken into account. So the great advantage of using this personal access token as part of my cloud desktop, I can connect to my OpenMetadata server using my personal access token. So whenever I'm making a request through the power of LLMs, it's assuming my identity through the personal access token and making these calls into MCP. So all my policies and everything will be acted upon accordingly into this MCP. And the part of knowledge graph I am privileged to access to will be given access through the LM as well, so that it's not exposing wide variety of data that I don't have access to, but only my context to it. So those two are really important for us to go into kind of provide this as a production-ready MCP server. So what we did, so out of the box deployment, so you don't have to run yet another server. Your users don't need to worry about running yet another server at another component as part of your infrastructure. So run OpenMetadata server, enable MCP server. Everyone in your organizations will have the benefit of connecting to a flat desktop, any of your LLM tools. It's just not just an API wrapper. Again, we are using the internal details of our knowledge graph. We are exposing all these details from lineage, from metadata, schemas, and everything else, also along with the test results, test quality results that are you're writing, you're exposing all of this information into OpenMetadata. All of this will be available to the knowledge graph, through the knowledge graph to the LLMs. For example, maybe a data analyst comes in, hey, I want to build a customer ARR, and it provides few tables back to it. It can also say that, hey, out of these tables, use customers underscore with the tier 1 table because it is highest graded and it has the higher in the passing data quality results for last n number of days. So this is the right table for you to use rather than exposing random tables to the users. Native authentication authorization, bring the user context who's using it, what permissions they have, what part of the metadata they can be using, and embed that into LLM rather than exposing the entire metadata without any security or any role-based access control. So these three are baked into it. So this makes it really easy, really scalable. Again, taking into authentication authorization from day one rather than implementing as a afterthought. So this is what we have done so far. Now it's time for demo. So Mohit, you want to share?
Okay, so imagine being a data analyst who is trying to build some dashboard and would like to have the knowledge and information we have in open metadata, have some contextual summary and insights using this MCP tool and use use that information to build the maybe customer retention dashboard out of it. So we can always look for customer table in open metadata, try to analyze those tables, what all kind of columns it has, what all queries are associated with it, and based on that, we can still build customer retention table dashboard that we're trying to build. But now, since we have MCP, we can go ahead and maybe give a prompt asking it to get the relevant information related to the customer's table, analyze that information. Let's see what it does when we give this as a prompt. Uh, so as you can see, it's trying to look for customers and the tables that are related to customer. Uh, this information is coming from OpenMetadata. We have the description, the queries, which says what all kind of table these tables are getting joined with. Uh, for example, if you take a look at in customer, it has a bunch of queries that are associated with it, and it is joined with other tables, right? So this information is also used by this to look for other tables. For example, even though I'm asking about the customer tables, it looks for order table and other tables that might be associated with these tables. And then after that, it gets the core tables that might give the right kind of information to build that dashboard. For example, dim customer is one such table, raw customer is also one such table. Then these can be joined with orders and sales tables to get uh, the required information that is needed to build that. But for now, let's say more interested in this dim customers table. Uh, so what I'm going to do is, maybe this sounds interesting. Can you tell me more about it and analyze what all theories it uses and explain them? So what it's going to do is it's going to fetch the information about dim customer now and what all queries are associated with it. And these tables are related to that. So it's trying to build that information. So it gives me like information about different customer, like it has 29 columns. It has some customer segmentation columns, like new, returning, loyal, and stuff. These are the segmentation column flags. These are the purchase history columns and whatnot, right? And on top of that, it is also getting the queries that are associated with the dim customer. Like this query basically gives you a customer segmentation distribution. Uh, and another query is giving you uh, what kind of customer are at risk and how you can identify using these queries, right? So all this information summarized in a nice format available. And then you can always go ahead and ask it to do something like this. Can you build the customer retention dashboard based on above information you have from OpenMetadata? I use use some sample data to build that for now. Later, maybe I can replace with actual data that I can get from above here. Let's see what it does. So it's trying to build the dashboard based on different queries. So as you can see that we had this query where it was segmenting by customer lifetime value, right? And it's trying to build all that information over here using this as the context that is coming from OpenMetadata. Let's give it some time. So as you can see, even though it's dummy data, you can actually use this, and you can always populate with the actual data that you get from the queries that are here. But you get a nice dashboard where you can visualize what is the current retention rate, how many of your, what percentage of your customer at risk, and you can also get a bunch of graphs and pie chart giving you the customer segmentation, what percentages of new and whatnot, right? In actual scenarios, you will give the actual data and then just simply use the same code, supply it, and then get a visualization of how things are happening. Okay, another scenario would be, imagine you being a data steward, and you see there are a bunch of customer tables that does not really have any owners, and there is a data team, and I want as a data steward that these customer tables needs to be owned by this data team. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to MCP. I'm going to ask it to do a bunch of things. Find the assets that are basically talking about customers, and then see which of those have no owners that are associated with it. And then find the information about data team, and then add that data team as owners for all the customer assets that this tool finds. So let's see what it does. Okay, it's trying to look for the customer tables first using the search tool that we have. So it got 4 tables that matches the criteria, and then it fetches the data team information, and then it's trying to patch the information about ownership for these different uh, assets we have, customer asset tables we have. So if I head over to data team now, it earlier had 0 assets, but as you can see, it starts populating now. Raw customer has a owner, which is data team. Same goes for dim customer and customer events. Okay. So then at the end, it also gives a summary of for which all tables it has populated that assets. So this way, we can also automate the process of assigning ownership based on certain criteria, where you're looking for different assets, checking whether they have some owners or not, and then assigning some team or a user as owner using this tool.
What we are doing. So it's currently work in progress. We have the earlier tool available, mentioned in the PR just this week into our open source. It's coming into 1.8. This is an open source release. We'll continue to have more and more tools. And again, the context of open metadata, the rich knowledge graph that we maintain will enable you to do kind of different personas, different use cases that we just showed, all the way from data governance team, creating a business curiosity terms, data analyst trying to find the right table and understanding the queries that are running against the table. From a data engineering perspective, understanding their status of pipelines. Again, the benefit of using OpenMetadata MCP Server is we backed by that generic global unified knowledge graph that powers all of this metadata and all of these queries together. So we are excited get you the MCP server the right way, in a scalable way, in a simple format, with authentication and role access control enabled, not just a simple server that everyone needs to install. So yeah, thanks everyone.